All right, we are all here. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Maribel Castaneda, and I'm the Director of Appointments and the Director of Latino Outreach for the Governor's Office. I am half of the mighty team of two that support the appointments process on behalf of the Governor for over 300 boards and commissions. Each board plays a critical role in supporting our state government. The idea for this panel came out of the Virginia Latino Advisory Board's curiosity on what other Latinos are doing on other boards and commissions across the Commonwealth. The idea was, wouldn't it be nice to bring board members together? And while we envisioned this event to be in person, we still wanted to create a space where we would invite current board members, current applicants, and those interested in board service to convene for a panel discussion. My role as Director of Latino Outreach is also to connect the Hispanic and Latino community to resources and services while identifying opportunities that we can also support with. And I know you'll hear this from a number of our speakers today, but we need more Hispanic, Latino, and Latinx voices on our state boards and commissions. Our voices are stronger when we're represented, so I challenge each one of you to identify someone in your community who might be interested in serving. I want to provide you a roadmap for today's panel. You will hear from Paul Berry, who is the chairman of the Virginia Latino Advisory Board. You'll hear from Secretary Kelly Thomason, who leads the Office of the Secretary of the Commonwealth. And our panelists will be introduced by Melody Gonzalez, who is a board member of the Virginia Latino Advisory Board and chair of the Education Committee. Melody will also be moderating the conversation. So feel free to drop any questions in the chat. It is now my pleasure to introduce Paul Berry, chairman of the Virginia Latino Advisory Board. Paul has lived in Virginia since 2015 and has over a decade of public and private sector experience working in economic development and public policy. He is now the director of data intelligence at Aegis Mobile, a firm that provides predictive modeling and machine learning-based solutions to public and private clients on 2 continents. He spent several years working on economic inequality and poverty reduction measures at the World Bank and in foreign countries between 2007 and 2013. His work portfolio included Latin America, East Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Prior to joining Aegis, Paul worked with AFS-CME, a public sector employee union dedicated to improving the lives of working families in the US and Puerto Rico. While on leave from AFS-CME to fulfill an assignment with the AFL-CIO, Paul worked closely with the Latinx communities to increase involvement in civic activities like voting, voter registration drives, workforce training, and safety awareness. Paul graduated from Brown University with a bachelor's in mathematics. He graduated from the University of Geneva with a master's in political science, and the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy with a master's in public policy and economics. Paul?
Thank you, Maribel. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Happy end of Hispanic Heritage Month. First, I'm very pleased to see that Governor Northam and the First Lady are recovering well. And on behalf of the board, we wish them continued good health. We're looking forward to seeing his press conference later today at 2 p.m. So as Maribel said, my name is Paul Berry. I'm the chair of the Virginia Latino Advisory Board. VLAB is a group of citizen advocates from throughout the Commonwealth who advise Governor Northam on issues of Latino interest. We serve at the pleasure of the governor, but in a day-to-day sense, his administration has truly made the board partners in advancing the quality of life and well-being of the Latino community. Like the executive himself, the board holds the public interest as its primary goal. VLAB's work is all volunteer and constantly seeking to better the lives of Latinos in the Commonwealth. The same can be said of all boards and commissions in Virginia, from the Outdoors Foundation to Service and Volunteerism to the Museum of Natural History. Latinos and our colleagues all around Virginia are demonstrating leadership and action to advance the public good. Latinos can trace their heritage in Virginia back 500 years, entering now what is the Chesapeake Bay in 1525. That's almost a full century before the Jamestown settlers landed in 1607. The incredible accomplishments and progress the Latino and Hispanic communities have made in industry, the arts, and culturally have added to the patrimony and social diversity we all now enjoy. However, the challenges in 2020 have been significant, and in a few minutes, you will all hear from 4 terrific panelists who can describe the work of their board and what we can all expect to pursue in 2020 together. Before we begin the discussion, I'd first like to introduce you to Kelly Thomason, Secretary of the Commonwealth and a member of the Governor's Cabinet. Secretary Thomason has a number of duties, one of which is the Herculean task of recruiting and appointing over 3,000 Virginians to serve on all the many boards and commissions. The Secretary also serves the Commonwealth by managing clemency petitions, restoration of civil rights, and many others. She's been serving in this role since 2016 under Governor McAuliffe, previously working for Senator Mark Warner in his U.S. Senate office. She's a native of Richmond and received her Bachelor of Arts from Virginia's own Virginia Commonwealth University. I'm very pleased to introduce Secretary Kelly Thomason.
Paul, thank you so much. Guys, I had some technical difficulties today, so I don't have any video. I apologize for that, but I'm lucky that my third device, I was finally able to join the call. So happy to be with you all today. I'm super excited to hear from all of our panelists and for Melody and Paul and others from VLab to join us. And I want to thank Maribel and VLab for putting this together and for getting the word out there. I'm really excited about it. It's something that we've been talking about for a while, and I hope that this will be one of many similar discussions where we might share a little bit about the work that you all are doing, serving on our state boards and commissions, and hopefully recruit others that will want to participate as well. As Maribel mentioned and Paul reiterated kind of why it's so important to have strong Latino and Hispanic voices serving on our state boards and commissions. We have over 300 boards and commissions that the governor makes appointments to. And so many of you know these kind of cross issue areas, you know, from commerce and trade and education and health and human resources, agriculture, you know, you name it, there is a board that supports that work that's being done in the Commonwealth. And it's super important to Governor Northam and to our administration that those boards reflect the rich diversity in Virginia. We want to make sure that our boards look like Virginia and that they're representing all Virginians. And so to do that, we need to have more Latinos and Hispanics serving on our state boards and commissions across the board. You know, VLab is fantastic. They're doing amazing work. We're so thankful for all of the contributions there, and all of our VLab Virginia Latino Advisory Board members have heard me say so many times, I love the work that you all are doing. We need your voices here, and we need to tell your friends, don't just sign up to serve on VLab. We need your voices on all of the boards and commissions. You know, we need to make sure that that perspective is being represented on our healthcare boards, on our commerce and trade boards, on those, especially some of those regulatory boards. And I know if you've joined any of our calls in the past, you've heard us talk about, you know, kind of broadening your mind when you're looking at those list of vacancies. Our regulatory boards are always a really good example of that, where somebody might say, hey, that's not really like, I don't know anything about that issue, or it's not really my background or my interest. But many of our regulatory boards have members of the general public that need to serve on them too. They're sort of the checks and balances on that board. Is this board really representing all Virginians? Are they making decisions that work for everybody? And so having, and when I say regulatory boards, I mean boards like the Board for Labor and Industry, or the Safety and Health Codes Board, or the Board for Funeral Directors and Embalmers, the Board for Real Estate Appraisers. There's a long list of any professions that are regulated by the state and require licensure, that there's boards that are regulating those professions. So it's so I could go on and on and on about how passionately we feel about this, but I also want to say that we can't do it without you. We need your help and getting the word out to your friends and family about these opportunities, letting them know that, hey, you too can serve. I've talked to so many people who say, I had no idea that these opportunities were available to me, that you'd want somebody like me serving on this board. And yeah, absolutely. It's not a secret club, although I think sometimes people feel like it is. But we want to make sure that that we're spreading that word and getting the message out there that there's a lot of really exciting opportunities, a lot of ways to give back and serve the Commonwealth and make sure that your voice and your community is represented and is heard. I'm super excited about our panelists today. We've got so many great friends who are joining us who have served in a variety of positions. Lisette, I'm looking at you. I always joke about kind of all of the different capacities that Lisette has served. So she can certainly speak to kind of across different secretariats and issues, that there's a lot of interesting opportunities out there. And I know I think almost all of our panelists today have served on not just one, but two boards since I've been here. And so we're really excited to have those cross perspectives on different types of boards and what that service looks like. So with that, I will quit rambling. I wish you could see how excited I am right now, because I'm thrilled. I'm really excited to hear from our panelists and hear in your own voices what it's meant to you to serve, what that experience is like, and would encourage all of you to spread that word, let folks know that there's great opportunities. And if you've got ideas for other things that we can do, to please don't ever be shy about letting us know those too. So thank you again so much, everybody who's joined us. And I will, I'm going to turn it over to Melody now, and we'll go from there. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Secretary Thomason. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and really to also have your support through our board, along with the support that we get from Tracy DeShazer, who I think is with us as well, and Maribel Castañeda, and the whole staff team that support our board work. For me, being able to serve on the Virginia Latino Advisory Board is a tremendous honor, and to be able to help chair our Education and Workforce Committee is especially important in this particular moment where we're all living through this pandemic that's unprecedented, and trying to figure out how we can lift up the experiences of our community, whether it's our students and parents that are having to deal with things like school closures, or our essential workers that are still having to go out and work their jobs day to day in the midst of this really frightening virus. And really just figure out how we can move ahead, how we can emerge stronger from this. And it's wonderful to be able to bring our community's views, our experiences to the space of our board meetings, and work alongside administration staff who can take these perspectives and really help bring them into government to make sure we're doing all we can collectively to do right by our community. And today we have a great lineup of panelists, so I'm excited to moderate. What I'll do is I'll introduce each of our panelists. I'll ask a few questions, but I really invite all of you that are with us to drop in your questions into the chat. Let us know what questions you might have for them. I'll try to keep an eye out. And then, of course, in addition to weaving your questions in throughout the conversation, I'll also make sure we leave some time at the end for Q&A. And just so you all know, too, a little bit about me, I'm, Melody Gonzalez, as Kelly mentioned. I now work at the National Education Association, the nation's largest union, representing educators, 3 million of them around the country, including our Virginia educators. I focus there on our Latino community engagement work, but I'm incredibly passionate about helping grow the representation of Latinos in government, in great part because when I came here about 2004, I think, is when I first moved out here from California. I came for grad school, was able to work on the Hill, and really was exposed to what a tremendous difference we can make within our nation's and states' institutions. But we need more of our voices in these halls. We need more of these voices in elected leadership, but also in staff positions, and also these boards and advisory positions. I've had a chance since coming in and working in Congress to go on and work a number of different campaigns, including Governor Ralph Northam's 2017 campaign, President Obama's 2008 and 2012 campaigns, and did also get a chance to serve in President Barack Obama's administration, where I was a senior executive at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management and the U.S. Department of Labor. And so to be able to transition from that sort of federal level work to now being a voice of the community here in the volunteer board position is really exciting. And I'll also share that I had a chance along my journey to also work with a group called the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, a coalition of 40 plus national Latino organizations that came together, and we created a Latino appointment program to advocate for more Latinos in presidential appointments, but also state appointments like the ones we're talking about here today. And one of the things I found really interesting is that we have so much talent in our community. You know this, that's why you're here with us today. But there's so many great people who could be in service, and we need to be actively recruiting them, informing them about these opportunities, letting them know how they can apply, and helping demystify the process a bit for them, because their voices, just like your voices, are exactly the ones that we need in government, especially right now. So I'll share with you a few of our panelists who we have joining us. We have Lisette Carvajal, who is currently the Director of Government Affairs of the Virginia Healthcare Association. And before this position, she was a Government and Industry Relations Manager at Genworth. Earlier in her career, she worked at the Virginia Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services as a policy advisor and community integration coordinator. In 2014, Governor Terry McAuliffe appointed her as policy analyst in his policy office and as Virginia's Latino liaison. In this role, she helped advise the governor on policy and legislative priorities. She's a graduate here of the University of Virginia, where she earned her bachelor's degree in foreign affairs, focusing on Latin America, and she holds a master's degree in public administration from Virginia Tech. She has served on the Virginia Board of Health Professions and currently serves on the Virginia Advisory Board in Service and Volunteerism, the Alzheimer's Association Greater Richmond Chapter's Board of Directors, and the Virginia Health Catalyst Board of Directors. She's engaged with Alzheimer's-related organizations such as U.S. Against Alzheimer's and Hilarity for Charity, and she's also been a Virginia Medical Reserve Corps volunteer. Her parents immigrated from Lima, Peru, and despite being born in the U.S., she shares that English is her second language. Let's go ahead and start with you. I'll share with each of the panelists a little introduction and then an intro question. You have such a wonderful breadth of experience, and I wonder, just to start off with a quick question, what does Hispanic Heritage Month mean to you? What to you is most important about celebrating your heritage here with us today?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Hi, everyone. It's so great to see so many familiar faces, people that I've worked with in past, people that I've heard about. Thank you, Secretary Thomason. It was a pleasure working with you. McCullough administration, I worked with Chris Falcon on a gubernatorial campaign. And it's so great to see so many of y'all today. I mean, for me, Heritage Month really means to gather with my family and learn more about them, more about ancestors, more of what really the values and morals that were instilled on them by my parents and great aunts. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I haven't had the opportunity to gather with my mom as I typically do every around this time. She is in an area where there has been some rise in COVID cases, so we're trying to be careful. With that being said, of course, we miss her Peruvian cooking. So my husband actually is an amazing cook, and he's taken it upon himself that throughout Hispanic Heritage Month, he will use some of her recipes to recreate some of our favorite dishes that my mom makes every time we visit her. So that's really how we've been celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm interested in hearing how everyone else has, but really it's just such an incredible opportunity to learn more about your culture and learn more of who you are, not just presently, but in the past, those who came before you, to really build that pathway for you to be who you are today.
Fantastic. Wonderful to hear, Lisette. I think many will agree that food and recipes are a really important part of our Hispanic Heritage Month, but also throughout the year. So thanks for being here. We'll get into a little bit more of the deeper questions around work, but start off a little light. And I'll jump off to our next panelist, Roberto Quiñones, who's a lifelong community advocate, beginning his volunteer life on the board of a United Way startup called Project Blueprint. It was an entity to recruit, train, and place professionals of color onto the boards of the local United Way and its member agencies. Since then, he's continued to serve building bridges between commercial, government, and nonprofit agencies. After serving on the Fairfax Long-Term Care Coordinating Council, he was then appointed to the Commonwealth's Council on Aging. He recently termed out after serving under 3 governors here in Virginia, and now he serves on the board of the Virginia Museum of Natural History. He also serves on the National Diversity Advisory Council of the American Red Cross and received his BA from Columbia and master's from Seton Hall. Roberto, share with us a little bit about your Hispanic heritage and what this month means to you as a Latino leader here in Virginia.
Well, as Lisette mentioned, it's definitely a time for reflecting on family and where we've come and how far we've developed. There's a bit of nuance in coming from Puerto Rico and having my family from there, and a major portion of the family in New York. So slight different flavor, but at the same time, it shows how regardless of where and when we developed, where our roots and values lie. I think the food part is great. It's really hard to find some great. I can tell you I can more easily find Peruvian food than I can find food from Puerto Rico around here. So we definitely get our saltados every now and then. But it's a time to reflect. It's the time of year where you're not thinking of the Cinco de Mayo or Irish the Irish Day as well. We're actually focusing on culture and not partying. We're looking to see how our people have developed, where they're represented, and as an advocate, I myself like to poke around at times and try to find out what organizations that I haven't heard from during the year and see what they are doing to celebrate, honor, and reflect upon the accomplishments of our community. So little family, little fun, and a little retrospection of where we are and where we could be.
Absolutely. Thanks, Roberto. And I think that's such an important point, right? Recognizing our history, where we've come, but also the future of where we need to go. And especially today, I want to also make that plug. If anybody has not registered to vote or knows people who have not, today's the deadline to register to vote here in Virginia. So one of the greatest ways that we can exercise our political power is by making sure every eligible Latino, all 32 million of us, are registered to vote in our respective states. In addition to finding different ways to influence our and be part of our state government, whether it's serving on boards and commissions or as staff, as we have some of our panelists that have done here before. Next, I'm excited to introduce somebody who actually swore me into my position as a VLAB board member. Chris Falcon is the Civil Division Supervisor, Deputy Clerk, and Legal Counsel of the Arlington County Circuit Court Clerk's Office. He's also the owner and founder of the Falcon Firm, an estate planning law practice. He currently serves on James Madison University's Board of Visitors, Fairfax County Human Services Council, the Board of Directors of Edu Futuro, and the Arlington and City of Falls Church ASAP Policy Board. Previously, he was vice chair of the Virginia Latino Advisory Board, and he received his bachelor's in business administration from James Madison University and his JD from Widener University Law School. So Chris, share with us a little bit about your Hispanic heritage and what this month means to you.
Thanks, Melody. It's an honor to be on the panel today, and I appreciate you bringing that up. One of the most fun things I do at my job in the Arlington Circuit Court Clerk's Office is swear in individuals who have been appointed to state boards and commissions, and I always excitedly come up front and administer it and give them the same spiel. It's an honor, and I'm so proud to meet someone else that's a member of the club now. But again, it's an honor to serve. I celebrate my heritage by introducing my children to the customs of my parents' countries, which are Peru and Ecuador. I tell them, and we listen to the music. We obviously eat the food. Yes, Roberto is correct. There's a lot more Peruvian food in the Northern Virginia area than there is food from Puerto Rico. And that's not a slight on Puerto Rican food at all. It's amazing. But my kids love the music and the food. Pollo a la brasa, ceviche, and seco are mainstays in the Falcon household. And me and my wife are both learning how to cook those so that we don't always have to carry out right now. But one of the most important things my parents taught me was how to speak Spanish. It was also my first language. So I'm trying to pass that on to my children. And anywhere I go and any speaking engagement that I have with young people in Northern Virginia, I constantly do tell when it's Latino students and individuals attending to keep speaking Spanish and to not forget that language, because it is so important in the workplace in the areas that I live in Northern Virginia. So I tell them, keep speaking your Spanish, please. I also continue to work with individuals of Latino and Hispanic culture through Edifuturo, helping students that are coming up through that program with their journey to college and eventually into the workplace. So just by continuing to pass on that music and that food culture, and then also being a proponent of continuing the language.
Beautiful. I love hearing that. And that's something that, definitely resonates with me. I'm a tia to a beautiful 3-year-old little niece, Hope, who's speaking in English and Spanish, and, being able to share with her the music, the inspiration, and also just fun children's books right now that can help us celebrate everybody from Selena to Sonia Sotomayor. It's really special to be able to share our culture with that next generation. So I love that you bring that into the space. Thanks, Chris. And I'm excited to introduce another great friend and wonderful advocate that we have here. Raul Garcia is somebody who I really respect and admire. I got to know him through the Green Latinos community, a network of environmental justice advocates that are Latinos. He's legislative director for healthy communities in the Policy and Legislation Department at Earth Justice. Raul serves on the Virginia Outdoors Foundation, and he really focuses on protecting communities from pesticides and toxic chemicals, something that we know is really critical in all of our communities, and in particular our Latino communities. As a native from Mexico City, he moved to Chicago at the age of 10 and really views environmental advocacy as an extension of his work, protecting and advancing underrepresented communities. Prior to joining Earth Justice, he developed a career working to protect the rights of underrepresented communities, including advocating for many things that I'm sure you all care about as well: voting rights, civil rights, immigration benefits, labor and unemployment protections. He was associate attorney at a law firm for some time, where he specialized in family and employment immigration visa petitions, removal proceedings and asylum, among other immigration work. Passionate about advancing social, political issues in the Latino community, Raul has worked for a number of organizations that seek to empower and defend the Latino community here in the U.S. He is admitted to the Virginia Bar and received his JD from American University Washington College of Law in 2013. He's also magna cum laude graduate of Villanova University, where he earned a full merit scholarship and majored in global interdisciplinary studies and political science with a certificate in international relations. So Raul, share with us a little bit about what being Latino in the U.S. and Hispanic Heritage Month means to you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Melody. So great to see you again. So great to be on the panel with everybody here. I grew up in Mexico until I was 10 years old. So for me, it's El Grito, right, in Mexico City, and really having a tradition come back. And I have a 3-year-old and a 3-week-old at home. So trying to, as many other panelists have mentioned, trying to bring that here now. All of that culture. So I think that for me, Hispanic Heritage Month is sort of serves a dual purpose. One is sort of building on the nostalgia and history that we have from our home countries, and all of that heritage and all of that value that comes with us to this country. And then the other part is really, I think it's a great experience, particularly in Northern Virginia, trying to showcase the assets that the Latino community brings to the table. Right. Unfortunately, when we have such a negative national rhetoric, we have to juxtapose it. We have to differentiate it to what the actual reality is on the ground. And I think that Hispanic Heritage Month really provides that opportunity for us to showcase the best of our communities, the best of our culture, and putting it out there as no, like when you get past all the headlines and all of that stuff, this is what we're really about. This is, we're about getting together with familia and pozole and singing mariachi songs and all of that is incredibly important. But I think also the spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood that occupies our culture, how we have been experts at it, right? I think the Latino community have been experts at it, to look beyond boundaries, to look beyond political lines, and to be able to say, this is my family and we're in this together. And so coming back, serving in the community and showcasing really the assets that we have, that spirit of family is really important.
Wonderful. Thank you, Raul. I love that point that you raised around the importance of us really owning and creating our narrative in this nation, right? It's so important that we not be guided or influenced by negative headlines or negative comments. We know that there's strength and beauty and resilience in our Latino community, and we need to find different ways to celebrate it and integrate it into the fabric of this nation. One way of which, of course, is by serving in the state government in a different sort of way. So thank you, Raul. I'll let you think about whether we might get a grito out of you before the session ends. But let's jump into why you all got into board service. I'm curious, Lizette, you've had a chance to both serve as a state employee under a governor and now on a board. What is it that really inspired you to want to engage in public service in the state government, both as a staffer and now as a board member?
Yeah, of course. Great question. So a lot of it came from my personal experience with my father, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's when I was a third year at the University of Virginia. Having to navigate, through applying to Medicaid and finding for him. His Alzheimer's was pretty severe. And being a first generation American, my parents didn't really know the language. So having to fill out that paperwork, having to translate, and kind of having to just grow up at the same time while being in college and trying to figure out what I want to do to be able to support my family coming out of college, because we knew that the care for my dad would be really expensive. That alone really how many other families might be going through the same thing, not just Latino families, but maybe African American low-income families trying to navigate their way through the system. And so for me, it was, how do I make it better? How do I use my purpose and bring that into these policy discussions that I had the opportunity to sit in during Governor McAuliffe's administration and at Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. Along the way, of course, I learned a lot of and a lot of what it takes to advocate for certain legislation and regulation. And so when I thought, I'm out of public service, I went ahead and joined Jen Worth, and now as Director of Government Affairs for the Virginia. Part of me that feels that part of me that is still will still yearn for that public service. So I applied to, the first was the Department for Health, Health Professions, which also was a regulatory board. I really enjoyed it. I had to step down because of my job, but when the opportunity to join the Service and Volunteerism Advisory Board, I said, well, how perfect is that? I already have a passion for volunteering my spare time in other areas, and being able to really help other, well, we'll get into exactly what, but being able to help others who have that same passion for helping and serving others, kind of navigate them through programs that are helpful towards communities that are in need.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks, Lizette. Appreciate that. And I know you've been such a vocal advocate around Alzheimer's issues, and it's been really beautiful and empowering to see how many different ways you've been able to bring your personal story and your passion to so many different community members. So thanks for sharing that. And I think that's something important for everybody in the audience to remember, that all of the different things that make you are reasons for you to be a board member. It doesn't just have to be your profession. It can also be an experience you're going through personally, causes that you're passionate about, that can create that bridge for some of the positions that you might want to consider applying for. Roberto, what about you? You've had a chance to serve in a few different boards and commissions here in Virginia. What got you interested in first joining and then in staying and shifting and continuing to be a board member?
Well, it's kind of interesting. We're on an aging theme here, because I also served on the Commonwealth Council on Aging way back when I got pulled from Cindy Benavides, who had these positions a long time ago. I had worked for AARP at one point, and I had just stayed involved in the community. Here in Fairfax, there was a local aging council, and one day Cindy called up when she had the job and says, "We don't we don't have enough Latinos in some of these boards. Like you're the only one that I've seen that had an aging anything. And I can tell you honestly, in how many meetings and conferences I went to until that one day when Lisette was in the room, believe it or not. It was the first time I had actually seen another Latino within the administration on the aging space. So think about all the other areas within government and just everyday life where we are impacted as a community, but we don't have one of our own at the table. So that had been a long passion of mine, of getting people of color involved in boards and commissions. And when Cindy called it, it made sense. I kind of graduated from the Fairfax Council to the statewide council. And you know, if you've seen my background, kind of an eclectic background of all kinds of stuff, when I finally turned out of that, I was, you know, looking on the other side for either youth or something to do with a more fun, lighter topic, so to speak. And having worked in the Museum Association at one point, Maribel said, "Hey, you're one of the few Latinos I've seen who has a museum anything. So what do you think?" So she twisted my arm and I finally said yes. But it's been a great ride so far. I've been on there for about a year. And because of my association background in general, it's just what you bring to this board. I bring to this board not only an ethnic slice of life, but I also bring some governance, bylaws, and that kind of a flavor to folks who maybe aren't as familiar with nonprofit boards. They're obviously captains of industry and they have their own businesses and all this kind of stuff. But there are definitely, as you'll see, nuances in performing in boards and commissions and nonprofit boards. So you never know what part of your eclectic background can be brought to bear, you know, when you decide to join and help out.
Yeah, thanks, Roberto. And I think that's a really important point to emphasize, right? That you can go to the Secretary of Commonwealth's website and look at what boards will have openings coming up. But also, I'd encourage you to not be limited by that, right? So if there is anything that is slightly of interest to you, go ahead and put your resume in, share your interest, because on the back end, staff may know about other positions that may soon be opening up that you might be a good fit for, and you might not even have imagined that it might exist for you. So I really encourage you all to make sure you go to the Secretary of Commonwealth's website, look at the openings, but also just apply, share your interest, communicate that to us as well. And hopefully that connection can happen. That could open the doors for you to be an appointee as well. Thanks, Roberto. And let's hop over to Chris. Chris, you know, what for you made you want to serve in a state board here in Virginia? And what was your journey like to secure that appointment and foot in the door?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me as a young lawyer coming back to Virginia from Pennsylvania, I was looking for ways to give back to the community. I had volunteered throughout law school and I had done pro bono work when I came back to the area. I was on the immigrant outreach section of the Virginia State Bar. And then I was also on diversity committees in the Trial Lawyers Association, but I had not yet had a chance to serve on the state board in that capacity yet. Actually, I think Roberto might know this, but I saw him post something on his Latino professional listserv that he runs in the DC area talking about VLAB. And I was like, ooh, VLAB, what's that? I want to find out about more about that organization. So in 2014, I went on the Secretary of the Commonwealth's website and I found out and I read the statute and I learned about this amazing organization that I said at that point, I need to be part of this. I think I applied the same day or same evening that I found out about VLAB. And I just felt strongly that at that time, our community needed people to step up, right? Needed people to say, this is going to probably be time consuming, but my voice is needed as part of this organization. So that was my story getting on the Virginia Latino Advisory Board. I served from 2014 to 2018. I was the business committee chair at one point, and then eventually I was vice chair of the whole organization, but met amazing people, did some really good work, and got a chance to help mold policy. And that was just a fantastic time and an opportunity for me professionally, but also to be able to give back. And I had to thank my fellow panelists for putting that information out on his listserv a couple of years back.
I love hearing that. And it's so important, right? Share this information with everybody in your networks, put it up on social media, email people, do that one-on-one contact, because really there are constantly vacancies. And as was shared earlier, right, 300 boards and commission seats are out there for our community to be applying for. And you never know when some of those seats might be expiring. People might be on the lookout for somebody just like you or somebody you know. So get those resumes into the Secretary of Commonwealth's website for sure. And Raul, how about you? What got you interested in serving on a state board, and what was your process like to become an appointee?
Well, I from working on Capitol Hill, I used to work actually with Secretary Strickler, the Secretary of Natural Resources, and you know, he went into the administration and he said, you know, kind of following the narrative of what we heard, we don't have Latinos here. You know, Secretary Strickler and I had been working on different various legislation at a federal level dealing with environmental justice, a lot of it pertaining to historical and environmental protection protections of places that have historical or environmental significance. And so a lot of, you know, we've heard sort of this narrative in the environmental movement, kind of, you know, people of color don't always use the environmental space. They don't go to the forest, they don't go to the parks. And I think that one, I think that's just not true. I think that we do. But two, I think that a lot of it is because a lot of times we don't see ourselves, our history reflected on those places. Those places are usually tell the story, a dominant history of European heritage and sort of what happened there, particularly I think in our Commonwealth, right? You know, we're always directed towards Jamestown and that kind of narrative, but we do have a lot of history here, and those special places that tell that history need to be protected as well. And so, you know, I was talking with Secretary Strickler, kind of like, you know, what I couldn't do in a board, and you know, I was very excited to know that the Virginia Outdoors Foundation exists, that of the work that they're doing. You know, and I think that, being completely honest, I think that we needed some redirecting a little bit, right? Trying to make sure that we weren't just protecting those places that are important for one specific family out that has owned the land, you know, for centuries, but also for the people that had passed through that land and that had that land even before European settlers came. And so I think that's something that I'm very passionate about, that we continue to work on. It's certainly not a done deal, but I think that we identified that need, and I thought that, you know, we're appropriate. I'd be happy to provide some, you know, whatever resources I had to make that happen as much as possible.
Great, thanks, Raul. So you've heard from people that have kind of come into the Secretary of Commonwealth's world through a number of different ways, whether it was the office proactively recruiting people, or sometimes, you know, others just hearing about the opportunities and applying from the outside in. So know that there are many ways to lift up your name and become part of the applicant pool. We've got a few questions in the chat, and I know we're coming down to our last 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do is just share with the panelists some of the sense of what we have here, so that we can try to make sure we speak to some of these questions. So Jorge asks about what the time commitment looks like on the board, how you balance that with family life and your separate personal career. And in particular, you know, now that we're in COVID, some people may have more flexibilities, but there also may be other sort of obligations you have in this more telework sort of environment that many may find themselves in. So I think people are wanting to kind of get a picture of what does the serving on the board actually look like in terms of time commitment. But also, you know, Ganek asks, what are some examples of how your voice and perspective has impacted the board that you serve on? You know, how did you hear about the board? Was it difficult to get on? Did you have to apply more than once? Basically, any sort of advice for those trying to get on a board. And so I think, you know, in my case, I think, you know, I love that being a board member is really what you make of it. We have certain, and that, you know, 6 board meetings. Our next one will be coming up this Friday. And so in addition to that, we have opportunities, though, as board members to engage in one-on-one meetings or small group listening sessions and committee meetings. And so much of it is really what we make of it, you know, what we see as community needs. All of the boards may vary a bit in terms of what the work looks like, but I love that spirit of it being what we make of it. so that as we're seeing different issues, we can bring that into the spaces. And in our case, for example, we're able to, in our education and workforce committees, often meet with the Secretary of Education himself and have very frank and real conversations about the issues that are of concern to our Latino students, educators, and workers, and have the ear of the person that is heading that department to make a difference. So it's really exciting. I think, I just kind of offer that as a little nugget, but I wonder for our panelists, can you help paint the picture a bit for what it looks like to serve on the board that you are on, and just remind the audience the board that you're on right now, and what sort of impact, any sort of examples of impact that you've been able to have, or the board has been able to have. So let's start with Lisette. Can you paint for us that picture of what your board service looks like and how you've seen boards make an impact?
Yeah, of course. Unfortunately, when I was appointed to the advisory board on service and volunteerism, it was in February, and shortly after March came around, and we all know what happened there. So a lot of our communications have been via email. We have not met, but I can share with you a little bit about my experience in the Board of Health Professions. We were actually in one that was really personal to me. We were voting on whether or not we should have a board on music therapy. And there was a legislation that was passed that would ask the Department of Health Professions to promulgate regs for that specific profession. There was public comment, and I had done actually my own research because my father, he had Alzheimer's and he was in a long-term care facility. And for the longest time, I had read various therapies that worked with folks who had Alzheimer's, one of them being music therapy. I knew that that was not regulated here in Virginia, but was regulated in other states, in which would essentially require someone to have a license and some sort of educational background, whether that's through a national organization that is certified or through a university. And we have a couple of universities here in the state. I think it's George Mason and Shenandoah University, maybe VCU, I can't recall, who actually offer that as a degree, if not a certification. So listening to the testimonies of folks who, well, you hear people that are for it and people who are against it, and you as a board member have to be able to, take in both informations and evaluate, whether or not this is important to regulate. And, having heard from folks who were for it, talking about how there were instances where people shared that stated that they were certified music therapists when there wasn't such thing in the state of Virginia. Maybe they have gotten it from somewhere else. And in some situations, they weren't certified at all, would go into long-term care facilities and would play music, but had no idea of how to handle the residents who had cognitive impairment. And so that hit really close to home, because I can envision that happening. I mean, I had a hard time, thinking, oh my gosh, if that happened to my father, and he had, like I shared, severe Alzheimer's and aggressive cognitive impairment, here comes a music therapist, or a so-called music therapist, who claims to have worked with this certain community, with a certain community, but really hasn't. So, would regulating this profession be just having that personal experience and being able to put myself in that situation that the individual who is sharing their public comment was talking about, that was very helpful for me in making my decision. Unfortunately, I didn't get through. I know that it's a board now, I believe, and Maribel, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was something that I was really, really passionate about. So that's one example that I can share with y'all.
Thank you, Lisette. That's beautiful. Love hearing that. Thank you. Roberto, what about you? Can you paint the picture for what it looks like to serve as a board member in your shoes, and specific examples of impact?
Well, folks, remember these are volunteer opportunities, and some of them are appointed. So some folks obviously are friends of friends, and they'll get appointed to certain things. And there are other folks who are very passionate about what they like to do, and will get themselves into situations. So I've seen everything on some of these boards where, you go 4 to 6 times a year for a couple of hours, and you go home and you wait for the next meeting. Unfortunately, there are folks that do that for whatever reason, but then there are other folks like us who get on there and we join committees. So you have your quarterly or 6 meetings a year, and you get on a committee, and that committee may have a passion about something, and you could be meeting once a month, you could be meeting twice a month. It's really, as the other speakers have said, what you put into it, where your passion lies, and how much impact you want to have. So for example, on one of them, we had one member who was kind of quiet most of the time, and then had a situation with her husband, and she was really upset about what had happened. She kept petitioning for an educational program to be developed to teach people about what happens when you got brought into an emergency situation at the hospital and you get put into a certain status. I forgot what the status was, some watch status, where you're not being covered by the insurance. And she drove it to the point where she literally was even on CBS News and was interviewed, and this entire thing blew up and went viral because of her passion to have other people not go through what she went through. So each board and commission will have its basic structure, will have its committees, and then it's up to you to, even if you want to, root and petition to be even the chair or vice chair of one of these organizations. And your experience, to the experience point, remember, you are a client, customer, end user of whatever is going on in the government. So while I wasn't allowed to get on the wine board because I don't grow wine, I'm still a wine user. Unfortunately, that is a trade group, so there may not be a seat for something like that. But there are plenty of other commissions where you have citizen seats, and that means you as a citizen are required or requested to be on there to provide your experiences, your wants, your desires, and your advocacy for this particular area. So, even if it's something that you may not know a lot about, you're still an end user. When you go to a restaurant, you may not know how to cook, but you know what tastes good. So if you want to tell folks what tastes good, you can get on there and with your passion, tell folks what you need and what the community wants. So it's your perspective, your desire, your wants, and at the end of the day, how much time you have to commit to something like that, and whether that is your primary volunteer activity, second or third thing you do. But when I would request and recommend, if you're going to do it, put your heart into it and make it one of your top 3 priorities of your spare time, because our community needs it out there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roberto. And for you, Raul, can you paint a picture for us? We're down to some of our final minutes, so I'll ask for Raul and Chris to share just kind of briefly, what does it look like to be serving in your board role, and any example of a nice win or community impact. Let's go ahead. Raul.
Yeah, so I think that, I think that you put into it what you want to get out of it, right? I think everybody has said that, and I think that is the case. But I think that sometimes it's with time, sometimes it's with expertise, right? And sometimes it's not so much, spending hours and hours sitting in a room discussing an issue, but bringing expertise that you already have, either because of your career, because of some past experience, and just kind of laying it out on the table. And at times when there is staff, in like we're fortunate to have at Virginia Outdoors Foundation, they execute, right, based on some of the guidance that you might be able to give them. So, I mean, for me specifically was, I found that the other members of the board were primarily older, white individuals who wanted to talk about environmental justice, but didn't know how, and thought that they were going to do something wrong while trying to do something good. And so they were kind of very apprehensive about it. And I come, in my job and my career has been dealing with that issue amongst many other issues of environmental racism. And so, I brought in and I was able to say, well, we need to stop being scared. We need to take this on. And, I can tell you the first 5 steps that we took, in my organization, when we decided to take this on and develop a roadmap. And then the staff really get to work on that. And you're kind of there as an advisor. So I'm not so much, the board meetings are there, but what I love to do is actually work as an advisor with the staff of the agency itself, and be able to, brainstorm ideas and see, oh, this might work. I might have this connection over here that might do something for you. So that's kind of my experience has been, and that's one of the impacts that we've been able to have.
Yeah, thanks, Raul. And that's such an important point, right? That the work of a board member doesn't have to be just restricted to those board meetings. You know, we have an open line of communication with the staff in the different agencies, in the governor's office, and as things are coming up on their end, sometimes they'll check in with us one-on-one for input, or proactively, we also have that line open to be able to share some of the things that we're seeing in the community that might help them out. That's, I think, something that's really, really powerful, and I'm glad you brought that up, Raul. And for you, Chris, what does your board seat look like? Any examples of nice wins or impact?
Yeah, thank you. I'll be brief, but I have the honor of serving Virginia on my alma mater's governing board, the JMU Board of Visitors. All our meetings are all-day meetings, and they're answering Jorge's question, I think, from above. There are several hours of prep required between the meetings, so it is what you put into it. It is a heavy lift, but it's very, very worth it. I think what's been very important, my impact has been from the perspective of a first-generation American on the board, first generation to go to college on the board. Whenever you're discussing topics regarding increasing diversity and those type of things and policy changes, I think it's important to have that perspective and that seat at the table. So immediately that's been my impact on that board.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. And I'll go ahead and make sure that we drop into the chat the Secretary of the Commonwealth's website. It's a really nice, I think, user-friendly website. When I worked at the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, we were actually trying to get many states to improve their hiring and their appointment of Latinos. And some states do not have as easy of a website to navigate as we have here in Virginia. So I'd really encourage you all, whether you are a board member now already or whether you're maybe thinking about applying, take a look at this website, really go through it, identify those areas that you think you might be a good fit for. And again, remember to keep an open mind. Apply, get your name in there. Sometimes people might have doubts or be holding themselves back or wonder if they have enough experience. If you have a professional connection, again, we've seen in our panelists, there are people that have personal connections to issues. Get your name in, make your interests known. And the staff are really wonderful to work with. So the most important part is getting your name in there. People don't know that you're interested unless you're able to actually share that information and apply. So I really want to make sure that you all visit the website. Maribel has dropped it into the chat here, the commonwealth.virginia.gov board and commission site. So take a look at that. And, we've also heard today that some people actually applied because they heard about these opportunities from others. So one of the most important things you can do is take this website, take this information, and take your experience as a board member, if you already are one, out into your community. Invite others. As Maribel mentioned too, I think we've talked about, let's take it on a challenge. How about each and every person here in this event thinks of a list of 10 people. 10 Latinos in our community that we can recommend to Maribel and the team. Let's work on getting at least 10 people each, people to apply from different sectors, different parts of Virginia. It'd be beautiful to see that base of the Latino talent pool grow. And Maribel's also shared her email, so you can also stay in touch with her through her email that is available in the chat. And as we near the end of our event, it's been really great hearing from everybody. I wonder if you can share just one sentence of what tip or advice would you have for those that are joining us and, either maybe board members or prospective applicants. One sentence of advice to close with. Lizette, let's start the closing with you.
Don't be hesitant to apply.
I love it. Perfect. Roberto?
I'll do a quote from Hamilton, and his quote was, write like you're running out of time. I'd say participate like you're running out of time. Get it out there, because you don't know what tomorrow will bring.
Beautiful. I love that mention of Hamilton. Chris, your last words or a bit of advice?
Get involved, and when you do, lean in.
Wonderful. Raul, your last words of advice?
Bring your assets with you. Dive in. We have a lot of expertise, knowledge that we could use here. So bring it with you. Get involved.
Wonderful. And Paul, I'll go ahead and bring you back into the panel here as well as VLab chair. A bit of advice. from your end?
Nothing that could outdo the terrific conversation we've had today.
Sure.
Stay involved, and yeah, we need all the help we can get for the Latino community in 2020. So let's keep working together.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul. And Maribel, I'll go ahead and bring you in as well. Any last bit of advice from your end?
I'm going to echo Lisette. Just get your application in. I've actually been fielding a couple of questions of what should I do? I don't feel like I'm worthy of applying. Just apply. Follow up with me. Send me an email, and I'm happy to walk you through the process.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maribel, for creating this event and this space for us. It's been really great to spend this hour, hearing from so many different Virginians who are working in different sectors and different spaces. And hopefully you all can feel what I'm feeling, which is this amazing energy and passion that they have for doing good. That's what brought me into serving as a board member myself. And particularly in this moment of time where we're seeing, the impact of COVID that's disproportionately hitting our communities, the racial injustices, economic injustices. There's so much to be organizing around, so much to be advocating for. And it's a really empowering opportunity to be able to serve on a board position here in our state and bring the community's experiences more closely into our governor's hands, into the staff's hands, and really make a difference for our community when they need it the most. So thank you all for joining us. And I want to make sure to thank you all, thank all of our panelists, and pass on to our Secretary of Commonwealth to share the final closing remarks and thank you. Kelly?
Melody, thank you so much. I can't say anything to top up that fantastic wrap up. I love it. I think when you first asked that question, what popped into my mind, which was similar to some of our other statements, but was just do it, right? Don't overthink it. Don't question whether you're worthy or if you should do it, but put yourself out there, and good things will come from that. So thank you guys all so much for joining us today. I loved this. It was heartwarming. It was motivating. It made me want to go out and work on some appointments this afternoon. Don't worry, we still have plenty to make this year and lots more to make next year. Maribel has dropped her information in there, and so she's great at kind of simplifying this even more than it already is and helping folks out and making sure that we connect you and really kind of take your strengths and point you in the right direction and maybe introduce you, like Roberta said, to a board you hadn't thought about before until we rope you into it. We're pretty good at that. So thank you guys all so much. I love some of the questions that came up, the thoughts that came up, as well as some of the questions that came up in the board, in the chat board that we're always continuing to think about. And how do we open it up even more? How do we make these more accessible for people who maybe don't have as much flexibility in their jobs and that kind of thing? And so, but we really appreciate it. This has been wonderful. I can't wait to do it again. And appreciate that all of you are going to jump off of this. And before you start the next thing from work, think about 5 or 10 people who need that website and go ahead and send it to them today. So thank you guys. We'll let you get back to it. And I can't wait to see you all again soon.